In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the front calipers on this Honda Civic. If you need these or any other parts, check us out at oneauto.com. Let's get started. Let's remove the wheel. Use a 19mm socket and take off all 5 lug nuts so you can pull the hubcap and the wheel off. Take this off. If you don't have a hubcap and a steel wheel, it'll just be an aluminum rim. And take the wheel off. With a collection bucket underneath and a 14mm wrench or socket, break free the banjo bolt. Don't remove it, but I want it broken free so that it'll be easier to remove once the caliper is dismounted. With a 17mm socket, remove the 2 bolts that hold the caliper bracket onto the knuckle. There's one. I like to leave one attached while I remove the other. That way it can hold the caliper on. Support the caliper and remove the upper bolt. Remove the caliper and flip it over. We're going to have to remove the old brake pads so we can reuse them. Push them in towards the inside of the caliper and remove them. Now set the caliper up on top. Now you have to prep the new bracket for installation. I'm going to put a little bit of silicone paste on the areas where the anti-rattle clips will mount. You don't want to put those on dry because it will most likely rust underneath, swell up, and if it swells up it'll push on the pads and, well, you'll have issues down the road. So a very thin layer of either silicone paste that is rated for brakes for high temperatures or brake grease, that works as well. Once you've done that, you can install the anti-rattle clip just like so. Just press it on, it should clip on all the way down. Flip this around and do the same over here on this side a little bit. And the anti-rattle clip, clip it on all the way. Make sure that's bottomed out. One last thing to do is to remove and re-lubricate the slider pins. Now these will have a little bit of grease as they get shipped, just so they don't rust on the shelf. And sometimes these boots are very, very well sealed, which is a good thing. So use a pocket screwdriver if needed just to break that seal very gently. You don't want to break the boot. Pull this off. As you can see, a little bit of grease, but not much at all. And I always prefer to add my own grease anyway. So I'm going to set this right here, take some of that same silicone paste on my brush. I'll add a little bit inside the boot. That's going to create a reserve of grease in here in the folds of the boot. The rest I'll put on the slider pin. If you put too much on the slider pin, it'll just get wiped off as you insert it, so that's basically going to be useless. Add some to this upper lip here. Work that grease in, slide the pin through all the way down. You'll see that there's air stuck in here. To get that out, push the slider pin in and squeeze on the boot. That'll get all the air out. If there's any residual, wipe it off, flip it over, do the same to the other slider pin. Now you want to do these one at a time because usually what happens is one of them will have a rubber boot on it, a sleeve that is, for dampening purposes, as you can see, and you don't want to mix them up. So you want to leave this one in this bore and the other one in the other one. Same thing, I'm going to add some silicone paste to the inside of the slider pin boot and some on the slider pin itself. Slide the pin in, get all the excess air out. And there we go. This bracket is ready to be installed on the vehicle. Take that caliper bracket, slide it over the rotor, line it up with the knuckle, start in the 2 bolts, snug them up. The torque for these 2 is 80 foot-pounds. Put the pads back in. The inner one had the wear indicator up top. The outer one does not have a wear indicator. Put it in at an angle and push it in. They should move around easily. If they don't, something went wrong in the installation of the anti-rattle clips and they're probably not seated all the way. Take the caliper, slide it over the pads and the bracket, and install the 2 bolts that hold it on to the slider pins. These are 12mm in size and the torque is 25 foot-pounds. I'm going to remove the banjo bolt because my torque wrench is going to hit it as I try to torque this, so if you have a shorter torque wrench, that might work. Set that aside, we'd have to remove it anyway. Now we can get a little bit more clearance here. That's 25. It's time to remove the banjo bolt off the old caliper. If you can do it with a power tool, that's a lot easier. If you can only do it by hand, that's fine too. You just might need to hold the caliper a little bit tighter. 14mm, break it free and remove it. Have a collection bucket ready because fluid will come out. Remove the bolt, we will not be reusing that. Get the line off the caliper. And let the caliper drain. Inspect the brake hose to make sure it's still in good condition. Mine looks all right, so I'm going to continue. Take the new banjo bolt with a new copper washer, slide that through the hose, then take the other copper washer, put it on the other side just to sandwich it all in between, and put the brake hose on the caliper. Thread this on by hand to make sure it doesn't cross thread. This new banjo bolt is an 11 millimeter. Snug it up. 25 foot-pounds is the torque for this banjo bolt. That's plenty tight right there. If you don't have a torque wrench that's able to torque this, what you want to do is after you bottom it out by hand and it feels like it's starting to get tight, give it about a half a turn. That's going to crush these two copper washers. They're soft metal, and that's what makes a nice tight seal. Obviously, we're going to inspect for fluid leakage at the end, and if there is any, you're going to want to address it, but that should take care of it. Remove the bleeder screw cap. Use a 10 millimeter wrench, break this free. We're going to perform a gravity bleed. What that entails is letting gravity pull fluid through the brake hose into the caliper, fill it up, and push the air out through the bleeder screw. Once you get a steady trickle of fluid with no air bubbles, the caliper should be full of fluid and no air should be in it. However, if your brake pedal does not feel good, if it's soft, if it's squishy, if it's not what you expect, then definitely bleed the system. Then definitely perform a manual brake bleed, which you will see at the end of the video how to do. But like I said, in most cases, a gravity bleed will do the trick. This is trickling steadily without any air bubbles. It's nice clean fluid, so I'm going to close this off. All right, bottom it out. Give it a quick snug. These bleeder screws you don't have to make very tight. You can actually easily over tighten them. Wipe off any residual brake fluid. You don't want it to continue dripping and getting all over the wheel and the brake caliper. And now you can reinstall the bleeder screw cap and put the wheel on if you are satisfied with the brake pedal feel. Once again, if not, you would move on to the manual brake bleed at this point. Let's get the wheel back on. If yours had hubcaps, make sure you line up the little cutout with the valve stem when you install the hubcap. Press that on. Put back all 5 of your lug nuts, snug them up in a cross pattern, and also in a cross pattern, torque them to 79 foot-pounds. Once again, the torque for these is 79 foot-pounds. Double check them. And there you have it. Take it for a road test and don't forget to get an alignment. To start the brake bleed, remove the master cylinder cap, which is located on the driver's side of your engine bay. Once you've removed the cap, if you read the text, it'll say at the top right here, .3 brake fluid. That's what this vehicle takes. So you want to make sure you have plenty on hand. And also, if it is dirty, definitely clean off the area around the cap and on the cap before you take this off. Mine was very clean, so I skipped that. There's also a little screen in here. We're gonna have to remove that as well in order to get the fluid out. I prefer to extract the old fluid before I start. So take this off and set it aside and make sure you put it somewhere where brake fluid won't damage any surface. And at this point you can use a fluid extractor pump. I'm using a vacuum pump. You can use a turkey baster if that's all you have, and just remove as much of the old fluid out of the reservoir as you can. Stick the hose in there, and I have this reservoir that the fluid will collect in as I pull a vacuum on it. All right, looks like I got it all out, or as much as I can. You will never get 100% of it out, but the more you do, the fresher the brake fluid will be as it goes through the lines. Now let's fill up the brake fluid reservoir with .3 brake fluid until it reaches the max line. The full line is this right here below the cap where it locks in. We're right about there, so I'm going to cap this off now. That way no debris or moisture gets in here. And now it's time to bleed the brakes. On this particular vehicle, the bleed sequence is to start at the front left caliper. That's the driver's side. Bleed that. Then move on to the right front, that's the passenger side front, then top off that master cylinder because it will be a little bit low after this. Then move to the right rear, the passenger side rear that is. And then the last one will be the left rear and bleed that side. Top off the master cylinder after that. And if the pedal does not feel firm or the way you expect it to, bleed again because there's likely more air in the system. But if it feels good, you're good to go. All right, so we're at the front driver's side caliper. I'm gonna remove the bleeder screw boot or cover. And I have this collection receptacle with a hose on it that goes right on the bleeder screw that prevents a lot of spillage. And I'm going to have an assistant in the vehicle ready to pump up the brakes, create some pressure, and then they're going to hold pressure on that brake pedal while I open the bleeder screw to let the fluid out. Go ahead and pump. Okay, open this up. There's a new caliper, so a lot of air. Go ahead and pump again. Okay, pump again. All right, getting better. Go ahead and pump again. All right, go again. I still see a few air bubbles. You want to do this until you have no more air bubbles coming through this hose or out the bleeder screw. All right, that was nice and clean. Let's do it once again. Go ahead and pump. Another clean bleed. One last time just for safety. All right, perfect. You can let go of the brake pedal now. I had several clean bleeds in a row, no air bubbles, no aerated fluid or anything like that. So I'm going to remove my hose and wipe this off. If there was any spillage, go ahead and clean it up with brake parts cleaner. You want to make sure that no brake fluid stays on the caliper, not only so that it doesn't get messy, but also you don't want to confuse it for a potential leak. Cover this back up. Hopefully you still have the cover. This prevents it from getting clogged up. And now you would move to the right front. That's the passenger side front caliper, and do the same exact thing over there. Now that you've bled both front calipers, remove the cap and top off the master cylinder again to make sure it's full for the rear. You want this to stay full. If it pulls air in, you're gonna have to start all over. And if you have ABS, it'll get into the module, so you wanna make sure you avoid that. Cap this off so debris and moisture doesn't get in. Let's continue to the right rear. We're on the right rear wheel. This has drum brakes, so we have a wheel cylinder on the back here. If you have disc brakes and a caliper, it is still the same sequence, so still right rear after you do the front. Having said that, I'm gonna pop the bleeder screw cap off of the bleeder screw. This is an 8mm, by the way, no longer a 10 like in the front. I have my assistant in the vehicle pumping up the brake pedal. Go ahead. All right, they're holding pressure. I'm gonna put my hose on here, and with my 8mm wrench, I'm gonna crack this free. All right, pedal hit the floor, so I'm gonna close it up. Go ahead and pump again. Okay, pump again. I don't see air, but this fluid is extremely dirty, very dark in color, so I'm gonna keep going till I get some fresher fluid through. One last time, go again. That is much cleaner. You can let go of the brake pedal now. I'm going to remove my hose, the collection bucket. And I did spill some fluid here, so I'm going to wipe everything down with a rag and spray brake parts cleaner on this to clean everything off. Once you've done that, cap off the bleeder screw. And the last wheel is going to be the left rear. That's the driver's side rear wheel. Now after you're done bleeding the whole vehicle, remove the cap off the master cylinder and put more brake fluid in all the way up to the max line to make sure that's topped off. Put this cap back on. Make sure it's locked on tight. And at this point, if your pedal feels right, you're good to go. Bleed is done. The torque of the wheels is 79 foot-pounds, so make sure you torque all those to spec. If you are unhappy with how the brake pedal feels, repeat the same sequence until there's no air left in the system and the pedal feels nice and firm with the engine off. At that point, you would take it for a road test and confirm. I hope this video was helpful, and if you have anything to say, leave it in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell so you can stay up to date with all of our latest content. Thanks for watching.